Porcelain shattered across the kitchen floor, breaking the quiet afternoon. Sarah froze soap still clinging to her hands. Her daughter, Emma, stood in the doorway wearing her white wedding dress from 3 days ago. The lace shimmered under the light, but to Sarah it looked ghostly, like happiness pretending to still exist. Behind her, Jake followed with a grin too confident for someone newly married. "Hi, Mom," Emma said softly, setting her purse on the counter. Jake sat at the kitchen table, his tone warm, his eyes cold. "We brought something for you," he said, placing a thick white envelope in front of her. "This will help us all work together better." Sarah didn't touch it. The ticking of the clock grew louder. Jake leaned back, voice smooth. "You know, planning for the future, money management, all that good stuff. Emma and I want to make a family account. Safer that way." Emma smiled. "Jake's really good with finances, Mom. He just wants us to be organized." Sarah forced a small smile. The envelope had her name written in neat, deliberate letters. Something inside her tightened. Jake rinsed his plate, humming like nothing was wrong. "Take a look when you can," he said lightly. "We leave for our honeymoon tomorrow. This will save time later." When the door closed behind them, silence filled the house. Sarah stared at the envelope before tearing it open. Her hands shook. Inside were legal papers full of words like joint beneficiary trust authorization transfer rights. Her heart pounded. Jake wanted her money, but he didn't know the truth. When Sarah's husband died 5 years ago, everyone thought he'd left her nothing but debt. Only she knew he'd secured $7 million under a false business name before his illness. She'd kept it secret, moved it into a private trust, untouchable, invisible. Not even Emma knew. Thank God. Because Jake wasn't just ambitious, he was a predator wrapped in charm. Sarah sat down, eyes on the wall of photos. Emma laughing, Emma at graduation, Emma holding her father's hand. Love and fury twisted inside her. Her daughter was trusting gentle, and Jake had seen that as opportunity. "You picked the wrong woman," Sarah whispered. Her reflection in the window looked older, but sharp. Her eyes alive with defiance. She turned off the light and walked to her study, the same room where her husband once planned his business. That table had seen contracts worth millions signed. It would now become her battlefield. She wouldn't argue or accuse. She would test him. Quietly. 3 days. That's all she needed. She picked up the phone and called her lawyer, Mike Dawson. "Sarah," he answered. "Everything okay? My new son-in-law thinks he's clever," she said. "I need your help." Mike sighed. "What's going on? I want fake papers," Sarah said. "A fake transfer, something showing I only have $240,000 left. Make it look real enough to tempt him." "You want him to find it," he said. "I want him to try," she replied. After hanging up, Sarah stood by the window. Outside, clouds gathered like bruises across the sky. Jake thought she was harmless, a widow in her 60s who baked cookies and smiled at strangers. He had no idea who she truly was, the strategist behind her husband's empire, the woman who'd survived betrayal, loss, and lawsuits. She locked the envelope in her desk drawer beside her husband's old watch. The ticking steadied her heartbeat. "Time's on my side," she whispered. That night, rain fell in steady sheets against the glass. Sarah sat in her armchair, staring at the storm. Her mind circled around Emma, sweet, hopeful Emma, who believed love could fix everything. Protecting her meant risking their bond, but better a daughter, angry than destroyed. She caught her reflection in the dark window. Gone was the fragile widow everyone pitied. In her place stood a woman of quiet strength, cold precision and patience, forged by grief. Her husband had once called her the quiet one, with teeth. He had been right. Jake wanted an easy mark, a mother too emotional to fight back a daughter, too trusting to see danger. Instead, he had walked into a fortress built from silence and strategy. Sarah smiled faintly, her gaze hard. 3 days, Jake, she whispered. In 3 days, you'll show me exactly who you are. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating her face. In that brief glow, she looked nothing like a victim, only like a woman who had already begun her counterattack. Morning rain clung to the windows, thin and silver. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, thoughts heavy. The envelope from Jake was gone, locked away with her anger. At dawn, she called Mike. By noon, he arrived with a black folder tucked under his arm, water still dripping from his coat. Everything you asked for, he said, setting it down. Fake statements, small accounts, nothing traceable. Looks perfectly ordinary. Sarah opened it. Inside were papers showing a modest inheritance, $240,000 left after debts and taxes. It's convincing, she murmured. Mike studied her face. You sure this is what you want? You could confront them directly. Sarah shook her head. And lose Emma before I have proof. No, Jake's already charming her into blindness. I need him to show his hand. He nodded. Then be careful. Men like him hide teeth behind their smiles. When he left, Sarah placed the folder on her desk, slightly open, easy to find. Then she waited. The next morning at 9, sharp, came a knock. A young man in a gray suit stood on her porch briefcase, in hand hair too perfect. Mrs. Johnson, he asked smoothly. I am, Sarah said. David Miller. I'm here on behalf of Jake and Emma, he said, smiling like he practiced in a mirror. I just have a few papers for your review. Sarah didn't move. My daughter's name is still Emma Johnson, she replied coolly. He blinked but recovered. Of course. May I come in? This will take 5 minutes. Her instinct screamed no, but she stepped aside. 5 minutes, she said flatly. He entered confidently, placing his briefcase on her dining table, the same one where Emma used to do homework. This is a safety clause, he began. Jake and Emma are creating a joint trust to protect family assets, including potential contributions from relatives. Contributions, Sarah repeated. Yes, he said easily. Any inheritance that could strengthen the account. Sarah crossed her arms. Show me where it says that. He pointed to Section 7.2, Parent Monetary Disclosure and Pre-Inheritance Trust Setup. Emma's rushed signature sat above a blank line, hers. Did my daughter even read this? They're young, he replied. They trust each other. Wrong answer, Sarah said coldly. Tell Jake he'll have to wait. I don't sign anything without my lawyer. He forced a polite smile. When should they expect your response? You'll get it when I decide. He closed his briefcase, smile fading. Of course, ma'am. Have a lovely day. When the door shut, Sarah finally breathed. Her hands were trembling. Jake had sent a lawyer already. He wasn't patient. He was desperate. That afternoon, she called Mike again. They're pushing, she said. A lawyer came with inheritance papers. Mike swore quietly. He's trying to corner you fast. Let him think he's winning. It'll make him careless. Sarah's tone hardened. Then I'll make it easier for him to take the bait. That night, she sat at her computer and left a trail, a small email mentioning an old investment account under her maiden name. If Jake was searching, that detail would pull him in. 2 days passed. The house felt too quiet, waiting. Then on the third morning, her phone rang. Mrs. Johnson said a polite voice from the bank. We've had an attempted login on one of your old accounts. Sarah's heart jumped. Which account one registered under your maiden name? The banker said. It's been inactive for years, but someone tried to access it from a new device. Sarah gripped the phone. Who would even know that name? According to our records, only your late husband and your daughter. Her pulse quickened. Please lock it down, she said, hanging up. Only 2 people knew about that account. One was dead, the other was being used. She stood by the window, rain streaking the glass, her reflection pale but steady. Jake was already digging. He thought he was hunting her fortune, but he was following her map. That evening, thunder rolled through the sky. Sarah sat in her study, the two sets of papers laid side by side, Jake's fraudulent documents and her own decoys. Lightning flickered through the window, illuminating her face. Fear lingered, but something stronger lived beside it control. She thought of Emma, trusting, hopeful Emma, who loved too easily and saw goodness where none existed. Protecting her meant risking everything, but better a mother hated than a daughter destroyed. Sarah's gaze fell on her husband's old watch, ticking steadily on the desk. Time had always been her weapon. She smiled faintly, whispering, "Keep digging, Jake, and you'll find exactly what I want you to find." Lightning flashed again, catching her reflection in the glass. The widow everyone pitied was gone. In her place stood a strategist cloaked in patience and quiet fire, ready to strike when the time came. 2 days later, the house felt too quiet. The storm had passed, but Sarah's mind hadn't rested. She walked through each room, checking the locks, feeling a tension she couldn't shake. She knew Jake had taken the bait. That morning, her phone buzzed. A message from the bank confirmed her fear, another attempt to access her old account. Same device, same location. Someone was getting desperate. She called Mike. "He's digging," she said. Mike's voice was low. "Then he's already halfway in the trap. You sure Emma doesn't know if she does? It's because he made her believe it was his idea," Sarah said quietly. "Then it's time to act," Mike replied. But Sarah wasn't ready for confrontation, not yet. She wanted Jake to feel safe before she struck. The next morning, she called Emma. "Sweetheart, when are you two coming back tomorrow?" Emma said cheerfully. Wise Sarah smiled into the phone. "Tell Jake I have the papers ready. Let's review them together at lunch." "That's great, Mom." "He'll be thrilled," thrilled Sarah echoed. "Perfect." She spent the day setting her stage. She booked a quiet garden restaurant called a Notary and asked Mike to come posing as her friend. She hid a small camera in her purse. Every detail mattered. When the next day came, the sky was bright, the air sharp after days of rain. Sarah arrived early, seated at a private corner surrounded by rose bushes. By noon, Emma and Jake appeared. Jake looked like he'd stepped out of a commercial light blue suit, perfect smile. Emma looked nervous but radiant. "Hi, Mom," she said softly, kissing her cheek. "You look beautiful," Sarah replied, squeezing her hand. Her eyes shifted to Jake. "And you rested." "Good to see you, Sarah," he said, grinning. "This is my friend, Mike," Sarah said. "He works in insurance." Jake shook his hand politely, unaware. For the first 15 minutes, they made small talk, wedding stories, travel weather. Emma laughed, relaxing. Jake told some charming story about losing luggage and borrowing a hotel boat. Sarah smiled but said little. When the food came, Jake leaned forward, voice gentle. "Sarah, I just want to say I never meant to pressure you. I thought it'd be smart to plan ahead as a family." "How thoughtful," Sarah said calmly. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a familiar folder. "I brought the paperwork again in case you had time to think." Sarah took it, flipping through as if reading. Then she pulled out her own folder, the fake one Mike had made, and placed it neatly on the table. "This is my financial disclosure," she said evenly. $240,000 left after debts and fees. For a second, Jake didn't blink. Then his smile stiffened. "Of course," he said. Emma looked confused. "Wait, what?" "That's all that's left." Sarah nodded gently. "Your father had more debt than I told you. I didn't want to worry you." Emma swallowed. "But you seemed fine." "I managed," Sarah said softly. "Sold the lake house cut back. It's enough." Jake reached for his drink, his face tightening. "That makes sense," he said. Sarah added casually, "After today, I'll be closing that account and moving it into a small retirement fund." Jake's jaw clenched. He stood abruptly, forcing a laugh. "Excuse me." "Too much coffee." He walked away. The moment he left, Emma leaned in. "Mom, did you really call him a liar?" Sarah met her eyes calmly. "No, I just said I wouldn't sign without a lawyer." "He said you were harsh," Emma whispered. Sarah sighed. "Sweetheart, sometimes people hear what they want to hear." Jake returned a few minutes later, calm again. "You're right, Sarah," he said smoothly. "Let's build trust the old-fashioned way." Sarah smiled faintly. "That sounds nice." They finished lunch politely, but under the table, Sarah's hands stayed tight. She could feel Jake's anger pulsing behind his charm. He wasn't done. When the meal ended, Emma hugged her mother. "I'm glad we talked," she said. "Me too," Sarah replied. "You know I only want what's best for you." Jake gave a polite nod. "Thank you for lunch." But his eyes told another story. Sarah watched them walk away hand in hand, the sunlight catching on Emma's hair. To anyone else, they looked perfect, a young couple in love. But Sarah saw the truth. Jake was calculating his next move. She exhaled slowly. The first round was over. He thought he'd fooled her, but he'd just revealed everything she needed to know. As the waiter cleared the table, Sarah glanced at the small camera hidden in her purse, its red light blinking softly. Every word, every glance, it was all there. And for the first time in weeks, she smiled. 2 nights after the lunch, Sarah woke to the sound of her phone vibrating on the nightstand. It was almost 2 a.m. Half asleep, she answered, expecting a wrong number. Instead, it was her banker, her voice tight with concern. "Mrs. Johnson, we've detected an online request to transfer funds $240,000 from your old account." Sarah bolted upright. That account was supposed to be closed. "Yes, which is why we flagged it. The attempt came from a tablet registered under your daughter's name." For a moment, Sarah couldn't speak. "Emma's tablet?" "Yes." "Do you want us to freeze access?" "Immediately," she said. Her hands shook as she ended the call. Jake had done it. He had tried to steal the fake money and used Emma's device to do it. She sat in the dark, the rain whispering against the window. Fear mixed with fury. He hadn't just crossed a line. He dragged Emma over it, too. The man her daughter loved was now a thief hiding behind her name. By dawn, Sarah hadn't slept. She called Mike the moment light broke through the clouds. He took the bait, she said quietly, tried to pull the transfer through Emma's tablet. Mike exhaled. "Then we've got him. The bank logs, device, ID, timestamps, it's enough proof for a full case." "I don't want a case," Sarah replied. "I want Emma safe. Then we show her the truth." "Not yet," Sarah said. "If she thinks I'm attacking him, she'll defend him. I need her to see it herself." That afternoon, she sent a message. "Come home. Just you, no Jake." Emma's reply came fast. "Why, what's wrong? Just come. Please." At 2 o'clock, Sarah heard tires crunching the driveway. She waited at the kitchen table, a lemon cake cooling beside her, the same kind Emma had loved as a child. When her daughter entered, her eyes were cautious. Mom Sarah smiled gently. "Sit down, sweetheart. We need to talk." Emma hesitated, then sat. "What is this about?" Sarah's voice trembled slightly. "I know Jake tried to access one of my accounts. The bank traced it to your tablet." Emma's brow furrowed. "That's impossible." "He wouldn't." "He would." Sarah interrupted softly. "I left fake financial papers where he could find them, and he did. He tried to steal money that doesn't exist." Emma's face went pale. "You set him up, I protected you," Sarah said firmly. "I had to know what kind of man he really is." Emma stood, suddenly shaking her head. "You spied on us." "You don't trust me, I trust you, but not him," Sarah said. "He's lying to you." Emma's voice cracked. "You hate him because he's not Dad." Sarah's chest tightened. "No, Emma, I hate what he's doing to you." Tears filled her daughter's eyes. "He loves me." Sarah stepped closer, then asked him why he used your tablet to steal from me. Emma froze torn, then turned away. I can't do this. I need space. Emma, please. But the door slammed before Sarah could finish. The silence afterward was crushing. Sarah sank into a chair staring at the untouched cake. She hadn't cried in years, but now the tears came quiet, unstoppable. Her phone buzzed again. Mike. I've got the full proof, he said. It was Jake. Same IP address, same login pattern. There's no question. Sarah's voice was hoarse. It doesn't matter if she won't believe me. She will, Mike said. But maybe she needs to see it herself. How wedding videos, he said simply. People like him can't resist bragging. That night, Sarah sat alone with her laptop scrolling through hours of footage. Music, laughter, smiles, it all felt like another lifetime. Then near the end, she found it. Jake stood among friends, drink in hand, his grin smug and careless. Someone shouted, "So you married Rich, huh?" Jake smirked. "Not yet," he said, raising his glass. "Give me a month." The crowd laughed. Sarah froze the frame. His face, his words caught in perfect clarity. Her heart pounded as she sent the clip to Mike. Within minutes, he replied, "Got it. This is gold." Sarah closed the laptop slowly. The rain had stopped, leaving the world eerily quiet. Across the room, her husband's old watch ticked steadily, marking every second of her resolve. Jake thought he was winning. He had no idea he'd already lost. Sarah stared at her reflection in the dark window and whispered, "You wanted a game, Jake. Now it's my turn to play." Morning light slipped through the blinds, soft and pale, but Sarah felt no warmth. She sat in her study, the frozen frame of Jake's smug face glowing on her laptop. His words from the wedding echoed in her mind. "Give me a month to do what steal, manipulate, destroy." The video alone could ruin him, but Sarah knew Emma needed more than evidence. She needed to see the truth. Love doesn't end with logic. It ends with proof. She called Mike. "I have the video. I've seen it," he said. "Should we send it to Emma?" "Not yet," Sarah replied. "If it comes from me, she'll think I'm manipulating her. She has to find it herself." Mike hesitated. "You're planning something, aren't you?" Sarah smiled faintly. "I always am." That afternoon, she drove into the city. Jake and Emma's apartment tower rose like cold glass against the sky, expensive, polished hollow. She pressed the buzzer. Jake's voice came through smooth as oil. "Sarah," he said, "she's sleeping. You shouldn't be here. I need to speak with her. She doesn't want drama." Sarah's tone stayed light. "Then let her rest." Before leaving, she slipped a small USB drive into their mailbox. The file inside was labeled, "Play Me." Then she walked away. 2 days passed. Silence. No calls, no messages. Then on the third evening, headlights cut across her driveway. Emma stepped out, eyes red face, pale. She walked in slowly and sat at the kitchen table. "I watched it," she whispered. Sarah said nothing. "I asked him." Emma continued, voice trembling. "He said it was just a joke. That guys say dumb things when they drink." Sarah's chest tightened. "And you believed him?" Emma looked down. "I wanted to, but I checked his computer. He searched how to access trust funds, how to bypass passwords." Sarah reached for her daughter's hand. Emma didn't pull away. "You don't have to explain," Sarah said softly. Tears filled Emma's eyes. "You were right." Sarah squeezed her hand. "You were in love. That's never wrong." Emma gave a broken laugh. "It feels wrong now." Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it and went still. "It's Jake." Sarah frowned. "What does he want?" Emma read aloud. Voice shaking. "He says he's hiring a lawyer. If I leave, he'll sue me. Says I used his money for the wedding. He has receipts with both our names." Sarah's eyes hardened. "He's bluffing." When he can't take from me, he'll drain you instead." Emma's voice cracked. "I feel so stupid." "You're not, Sarah," said firmly. "You just trusted someone who didn't deserve it." Sarah called Mike at once. "He's threatening her now." Mike's tone was cool, perfect. "Then it's time to end this, face to face." The next day, Sarah arranged a meeting at a downtown law office, glass walls, cameras, nowhere to hide. Emma insisted on coming. "I need to see his face when he realizes it's over," she said. Jake arrived 10 minutes late, sunglasses on, arrogance intact. "Ladies," he said smoothly, pretending confidence. Mike handed him a folder, a courtesy copy of our findings. Jake flipped through it, at first casual, then tense. Bank logs, device IDs, the video still of his grin mid-toast. "You can't prove anything," he snapped. Sarah's voice was calm. "Your voice is on tape, Jake. Give me a month. Remember?" He glared at Emma. "You told them." "No," she said quietly. "You did." Jake slammed the folder shut. "What do you want?" Sarah leaned forward. "You're going to walk away. You'll sign papers ending the marriage and release Emma from every shared account and property. No court, no noise." He laughed bitterly. "Or what Mike placed another folder on the table. Or this goes public. Local media loves stories about men who marry for money." Jake stared at them, fury rising. "You think you can erase me?" "No," Sarah said evenly. "You erased yourself." Silence filled the room. Jake's jaw clenched. He grabbed the pen, scrawled his signature on every page, and shoved the papers back. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "No," Sarah replied. "You will." He left without another word, the door closing behind him like a final sentence. The room was still. Then Emma broke down, sobbing into her mother's arms. "It's over," Sarah whispered. "You're safe now." Emma shook her head. "No, Mom. I doubted you. I hurt you." Sarah brushed a tear from her cheek. "You just forgot who you were." Outside, rain began again, soft against the windows. Inside, the quiet finally felt like peace. The storm was over, but the lesson would last forever. The next morning, the rain had stopped. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, soft and warm against the polished table where 2 cups of coffee steamed quietly. For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt peace, small, fragile, but real. Emma sat across from her, pale and tired, yet lighter somehow. They had survived. "Did you sleep?" Sarah asked gently. "A little," Emma said, wrapping her hands around her mug. "It still doesn't feel real. Yesterday feels like a dream I want to forget." Sarah gave a faint smile. "That's how freedom feels at first. Quiet, unfamiliar." Emma looked down. "I can't believe I didn't see it, Mom. He was so kind in front of everyone, so careful. I thought he really loved me. He loved what he thought you could give him." Sarah said softly, "Men like Jake are good at pretending, but they can't keep the act forever." Emma's voice broke. "I lost so much time believing him." Sarah reached across the table and took her hand. "You didn't lose time. You gained truth, and that's worth everything." They sat in silence for a while, the clock ticking gently. The storm had stripped away everything false, leaving only what mattered. After breakfast, Sarah walked to her study. The documents from the meeting were still there, signed and sealed. Jake's signature, bold and angry, marked the end of his power. She slid the papers into a folder labeled "Closed" and placed it inside the safe. When she turned, Emma stood in the doorway. "What happens now?" as Sarah smiled faintly. "Now we rebuild." Emma stepped closer. "You mean start over?" "Exactly," Sarah said, "but this time smarter. Stronger. Together." Emma hesitated. "Can I stay here for a while, as long as you want?" Sarah said. "This house has room for both of us." That afternoon, they drove to the lake, the same one Sarah had once pretended to sell. The air was clear, the water calm. Birds skimmed the surface as sunlight danced across the ripples. Emma sat on the old wooden dock feet dangling just above the water. "Dad used to bring me here," she said quietly. "He said this lake was where he thought best." Sarah smiled. "He used to say the same to me. It's where he told me we could survive anything as long as we didn't lose faith in ourselves." Emma turned to her. "Did you ever think you'd have to fight me to save me?" Sarah's heart ached. Every mother fears that moment, but love doesn't always mean comfort, sweetheart. Sometimes it means standing between you and a mistake until the truth shows up. Emma nodded, eyes glistening. "I think I understand that now." The wind shifted softly, carrying the scent of pine and rain. Sarah closed her eyes, letting it wash through her. For the first time since Jake had walked into their lives, she felt her husband's presence again, steady, guiding, proud. When she opened her eyes, Emma was watching her. "What is it?" "Nothing," Sarah said with a small smile, "just remembering how far we've come." They sat there for a long while, neither speaking, both breathing in the quiet. That evening, back home, Emma helped her mother make dinner. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and lemon. They laughed when Sarah spilled flour across the counter, and for a moment they were just two women, no lies, no secrets, only the gentle rhythm of peace returning. As they ate, Emma said softly, "Mom, is it true about the inheritance?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, $7 million. I kept it secret for years." Emma's eyes widened. "Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to protect you from what money does to people." Sarah said, "From greed, from Jake." Emma reached across the table and took her mother's hand. "No more secrets, okay?" Sarah smiled. "No more secrets." They finished their meal as the sun dipped behind the trees. The house was warm, filled with the faint sound of crickets outside. After dinner, Emma stood by the window, watching the light fade. "Do you think he'll come back?" Sarah shook her head. "No. Men like Jake don't come back once they've lost power. They just move on to the next target." Emma exhaled. "Then I guess we finally get to breathe." Sarah joined her at the window. Together they watched the last light of day fade into gold. For the first time, Emma leaned her head on her mother's shoulder and whispered, "Thank you, Mom, for everything." Sarah smiled, tears welling in her eyes. "You don't have to thank me, darling. You're my reason. You always were." The sun disappeared completely, leaving only the soft glow of the lamp behind them. In that quiet, Sarah realized the storm had not just ended, it had changed them. Mother and daughter, survivors, whole again. The following week passed in gentle silence. The house felt alive again, lighter, warmer. Sarah began waking up before sunrise, making coffee and opening the windows to let in the cool morning air. For years, she'd lived in that house as if guarding it from ghosts, but now, for the first time, it felt like home again. Emma was healing too. She spent her mornings reading by the window, her afternoons helping Sarah organize old boxes in the attic. Laughter began to return quietly at first, like a bird testing a new branch. But even with peace settling in, Sarah knew something wasn't finished. Jake might be gone, but men like him rarely disappeared completely. 3 days later, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You think you've won. You'll regret crossing me." Sarah stared at the words, calm but alert. She didn't reply. Instead, she forwarded the message to Mike. Within minutes, he called. "He's still trying to scare you," he said. "I expected as much," Sarah replied. "He's angry, not dangerous. Not anymore. Still, I'll notify the authorities just in case." Sarah thanked him and hung up. When she turned, Emma was standing in the doorway, worry clouding her face. "It's him, isn't it?" Sarah nodded. "He sent a message. Empty threats." Emma frowned. He won't stop, Mom. He hates losing. Sarah smiled faintly. Then let him hate. We have nothing left for him to take. That evening, Sarah found herself in her study again. The safe was still locked, the folder still sealed. $7 million. Untouched, since the day her husband died. She'd kept it hidden out of fear, but now she wondered what good was fortune if it couldn't protect or heal. She opened the safe and stared at the documents at the proof of everything she'd survived. Her husband's signature still marked the first page of the trust agreement. His handwriting had always been steady, confident. She traced the ink with her fingertip, remembering the sound of his voice. Take care of her, Sarah. She'll need your strength when I'm gone. She smiled sadly. I did, she whispered. That night, Sarah called Mike again. I'm ready to make changes to the trust, she said. Mike hesitated. You sure? Yes. Half will go into a new foundation in Emma's name. The rest stays where it is. I want to turn what almost destroyed us into something that saves others. Mike's voice softened. That sounds exactly like you. When Emma came downstairs the next morning, Sarah was already dressed, papers spread across the table. We're going to see Mike, she said. I want you to help me create something good out of all this. Emma blinked. You mean charity? Something like that, Sarah said. A scholarship fund, maybe, for women starting over, for mothers and daughters who need a second chance. Emma's eyes welled. You'd name it after me, I'd name it for both of us, Sarah said, because we built our strength together. Later that day, they drove to Mike's office. The sun was bright, the streets clean after rain. Sarah felt lighter with every mile. Inside the conference room, Mike handed her a stack of documents. She signed each page carefully, feeling something close to relief each time her pen touched the paper. When it was done, Mike smiled. It's official. The Johnson Renewal Fund. Emma laughed softly. It sounds hopeful. It is, Sarah said. It means everything we went through mattered. As they left, Sarah caught sight of her reflection in the glass door, steady, proud, no longer haunted. The woman who had once hidden behind fear was gone. In her place stood someone who had faced betrayal, exposed deceit, and still chosen compassion over revenge. That evening, they returned home to the smell of rain on the garden. Emma cooked dinner while Sarah set the table. They talked about small things, recipes, books, the flowers blooming outside. Life had returned to its rhythm, gentle and real. After they ate, Emma looked at her mother quietly. Do you ever think about Dad? Every day, Sarah said. But tonight it doesn't hurt anymore. They carried their tea to the porch. The air was cool, filled with the sound of crickets. The sky stretched wide, painted in deep blue and silver. Mom Emma whispered, Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for not giving up on me. Sarah smiled, tears glinting in the moonlight. That's what mothers do. We fight even when no one believes us. Emma leaned her head on Sarah's shoulder. You're stronger than anyone I know. Sarah looked up at the stars. No, she said softly. We are. For the first time in months, the world felt still. The past was behind them, the future wide open. The following month unfolded like a quiet sunrise. Sarah's home, once heavy with secrets, now buzzed with calm purpose. She spent her mornings in the garden pruning roses, while Emma handled calls from the bank and foundation lawyers. The Johnson Renewal Fund had already helped 3 women escape bad marriages, giving them a place to start again. Each story reminded Sarah that pain could turn into strength if handled with patience. One afternoon, Sarah stood by the window watching Emma on the phone. Her daughter's voice carried confidence, now steady, clear. The softness was still there, but it had matured into something stronger. Jake's shadow no longer lingered in her eyes. When Emma hung up, she smiled. We just got another approval. The fund's growing faster than expected. Sarah nodded. Your father would be proud. He always believed in building second chances. Emma's gaze softened, and you believed in surviving them. They both laughed quietly, a shared warmth flowing through the room. But peace, Sarah had learned, was never permanent. It had to be guarded. 2 weeks later, Mike called. "You might want to sit down," he said. Sarah's heart tightened. What happened? Jake's lawyer reached out. He's claiming emotional distress and wants a settlement, threatening to leak your financial history if you don't pay. Sarah's lips curved into a cold smile. He's still playing games. "I can shut him down legally," Mike said, "but it'll take time." "Don't bother," Sarah replied. "I'll handle him." That evening, she called a local reporter, the same one Mike had mentioned months ago. "I think it's time the world met Jake Wilson," she said. "I have everything you'll need." By the next morning, the story was everywhere. Businessmen tried to scam. Widow and daughter out of family inheritance. Photos from the wedding, quotes from the video, and bank evidence filled the headlines. The internet did the rest. Within hours, Jake's reputation crumbled. Sarah didn't gloat. She simply closed her laptop and exhaled. Justice didn't always need revenge, just light. Emma walked in later that day holding her phone. "Mom, it's everywhere. You really did it." Sarah smiled softly. "No, sweetheart. He did it to himself." For the next few days, peace returned once more. Reporters called, but Sarah refused every interview. The past was over. She wanted her future quiet. That weekend, Emma suggested a small celebration. Nothing big, she said, just us and maybe a few friends from the foundation. Sarah hesitated but agreed. That Saturday evening, the garden was filled with soft music, candlelight, and laughter. The air smelled of jasmine, and for the first time in years, Sarah felt whole. During the gathering, one of the women from the foundation approached her, a young mother named Lily, who'd escaped an abusive marriage. "Mrs. Johnson," she said shyly, "you don't know what you've done for me. Because of your help, I got a job and my own apartment. My son sleeps peacefully now." Sarah's throat tightened. "You did the brave part, Lily. You left." The woman smiled. "Maybe. But I wouldn't have had the courage if I hadn't heard your story." After she walked away, Emma slipped beside her mother. "You see," she whispered, "you turned everything that hurt us into something good." Sarah looked around the garden, the glowing lights, the laughter, the hum of life reborn, and felt tears prick her eyes. Maybe that's what all of this was for. As the night faded, the guests left one by one. When the last car disappeared down the road, Sarah and Emma sat together on the porch, barefoot sipping tea. Fireflies blinked across the yard. Emma spoke first. "Do you think he'll ever try again?" Sarah shook her head. "No. Men like him can't stand the mirror once they're exposed. He'll run from what he sees." Emma smiled faintly. "Then we really made it. Didn't we?" Sarah reached for her hand. "We did. And now we build something better." The moonlight touched their faces, silver and soft. Sarah thought of her husband, his voice, his steady faith, and knew he'd be proud. The family he left behind had been broken, tested, and finally rebuilt stronger than before. Mom Emma said quietly, "What will you do now?" Sarah looked out at the dark horizon. "Keep going. There's always someone who needs saving, even if they don't know it yet." They sat in silence, watching the stars scatter across the sky. Somewhere between the laughter and the loss, between the lies and the healing, they had found themselves again. For the first time, Sarah realized she wasn't just protecting what was left, she was building what came next. And this time, nothing and no one could take it away. Autumn arrived quietly, wrapping the town in gold and crisp air. Sarah's garden blazed with amber and red, the trees whispering like they remembered everything. Inside, life moved with a new rhythm. Emma managed the growing Johnson Renewal Fund while Sarah took care of the planning and paperwork. The house that once echoed with grief now hummed with purpose. The foundation had already helped dozens of women rebuild their lives. Each story reminded Sarah that pain could become something useful, even beautiful. Sometimes she smiled at the thought that her family's darkest season had become another's light. One morning, she stood by the window watching Emma on the phone. Her daughter's voice was confident, her tone steady, nothing like the fragile girl she had once been. When Emma hung up, her eyes shone. "Mom, the fund just got another donation. People are starting to notice." Sarah smiled softly. "Your father would be proud." Emma's eyes softened. "And you should be too. You made this happen." Sarah shook her head. "We both did. You turned pain into strength." They shared a quiet smile that said everything words couldn't, but peace, Sarah had learned, was never permanent. 2 weeks later, Mike called. "Sarah, I just heard from Jake's lawyer. He's demanding a settlement, claims emotional distress, and threatens to expose your inheritance if you don't pay." Sarah's expression stayed calm. "He's still chasing ghosts. I can file an injunction," Mike said. "But he won't stop easily. Let him talk," Sarah replied evenly. "It's time his lies met daylight." That evening, she called a journalist she trusted. "It's time," she said simply, "I'll give you everything." Within a day, the story broke. Businessman exposed for inheritance scam. Photos from the wedding court filings and clips from that infamous video filled the headlines. Jake's downfall was instant. The internet did what justice couldn't. When Emma saw the news, she turned to her mother. "It's everywhere." Sarah's tone was calm. "Good. He wanted attention, now he has it." For the first time in months, Sarah felt light. Justice didn't need rage. It only needed truth. A week later, Emma suggested a celebration. "Just a few people from the foundation," she said. "Nothing fancy." Sarah agreed, though. The idea of celebrating peace felt strange. That Saturday, the garden glowed under strings of soft light. Candles flickered on tables, the air smelled of jasmine and fresh grass. Laughter drifted through the warm night. A young mother named Lily, one of the foundation's first recipients, approached shyly. "Mrs. Johnson?" "You changed my life," she said. "I have a job now, a home. My son sleeps safely." Sarah's eyes softened. "You changed your own life, dear. I just opened a door." Lily smiled. "You gave me courage to walk through it." When she left, Emma came to stand beside her mother. "See," she whispered, "you turned everything that hurt us into something good." Sarah looked around the lights, the laughter, the blooming life that had replaced pain. "Maybe that's what it was all for," she said softly. As the night ended, Sarah and Emma sat on the porch, barefoot tea in hand. Fireflies blinked across the yard. Emma broke the silence. "Do you ever think about him?" Sarah sighed. "Sometimes, but not with anger. He was a storm, and storms pass." Emma nodded. "I used to think he broke me, but now I see he showed me how strong I am." Sarah smiled proudly. "That's my girl." Just then her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number glowed on the screen. "You were right." Sarah stared for a moment, then pressed delete. "Goodbye, Jake," she whispered. The wind carried her words away. They sat quietly, listening to crickets sing in the dark. Emma leaned her head on Sarah's shoulder. "I never told you this," she said softly, "but I was afraid you'd stop loving me." Sarah turned to her, her voice tender. "Nothing can make me stop. You're my daughter, my strength." Emma smiled through her tears. "You're mine too?" Later, when the house was quiet, Sarah stood by the window. The moon hung low over the lake, silver light spilling across the calm water. She thought of her husband, his patience, his wisdom, and whispered, "It's done, love. She's safe now." Something warm and still wrapped around her. The next morning, Sarah woke early. She brewed coffee and stepped outside. The air was crisp, the sky pale with dawn. The world felt new. For the first time in years, she wasn't waiting for anything, not love, not justice, not closure. Some storms end with thunder, others end with quiet. Sarah smiled, lifted her cup toward the rising sun, and whispered, "Thank you." Winter came softly that year. Frost clung to the garden fence each morning, and the air carried the smell of pine and wood smoke. Sarah moved slower now, but not from age. She was learning to live gently, to breathe without waiting for the next disaster. The chaos was gone. In its place was calm, steady, and fragile, like the snow that blanketed her world. Emma often joined her in the mornings, both wrapped in thick sweaters, sipping coffee on the porch. "You know," Emma said one day, watching the steam curl into the cold air, "it's strange. I used to think my life ended when the truth about Jake came out, but somehow it started." Sarah smiled. "That's the gift of endings. They teach us beginnings." They sat in silence, listening to the birds returning early to the trees. For the first time, Sarah saw her daughter not as someone she needed to protect, but as an equal, strong, centered awake. Later that week, they received an invitation from the State Women's Council. The Johnson Renewal Fund had been nominated for a humanitarian award. Emma's excitement filled the house. "Mom, they want us to speak together." Sarah laughed. "Well, you'll handle the speaking. I'll handle the nerves." The ceremony was held in the city auditorium, filled with quiet faces and bright lights. As Emma spoke on stage, her voice steady and passionate, Sarah felt pride rise in her chest until it almost hurt. Every word Emma said carried the weight of what they had survived. When the applause came, Sarah stood beside her, and for a moment, time folded, grief, betrayal, loss, all washed away in the sound of clapping hands. After the ceremony, they walked through the city park, the air crisp and glittering under streetlights. "Dad would have loved this," Emma said softly. "He's here," Sarah replied. "Not in the way we expect, but in every choice we make that honors him." Emma slipped her arm through her mother's. "You really believe that?" Sarah nodded. "More than anything." They stopped near a fountain frozen over but still beautiful. Sarah touched the cold stone edge. "I used to think money was the only safety left after your father died. But it wasn't the money that saved us. It was what we did with it." Emma smiled. "You mean what you did with it?" Sarah shook her head. "What we did. You were brave enough to change your story. I was just stubborn enough not to let ours end badly." They both laughed quietly. In the weeks that followed, life settled into something peaceful. The foundation grew. Letters arrived almost daily, stories from women rebuilding their lives, mothers finding strength again, daughters forgiving their pasts. Each one reminded Sarah why she had chosen grace instead of revenge. But one letter stood out. It was from Jake's mother. Sarah recognized the handwriting, instantly shaky but elegant. "Mrs. Johnson," it read, "I know I have no right to ask forgiveness for my son. I raised him better than he became. What he did to you and Emma shames me deeply. Please know I'm grateful you chose mercy when you could have destroyed him completely. He's left town. I don't know where he's gone, but maybe that's for the best. I wish you peace." Sarah folded the letter carefully and placed it in her drawer. For a moment, she sat still, processing the strange comfort that came from it. That night, she stepped outside under the stars. Snow fell lightly, soft flakes melting on her hands. She whispered into the cold air, "It's over." And for the first time, she truly believed it. Inside, Emma sat by the fire, flipping through an old family album. "Mom," she called, "you have to see this picture of Dad. He looks like he's about to lecture me about curfews." Sarah smiled, joining her on the couch. They turned the pages slowly, photo after photo, birthdays, beach trips, messy Christmas mornings. The memories no longer hurt. They simply belonged. "Do you miss the past?" Emma asked quietly. Sarah thought for a moment. "No," she said. "I think the past misses us." They both laughed softly, and the warmth of it filled the room. When they finished, Emma leaned her head on Sarah's shoulder. "I used to think strength meant never breaking," she whispered. Sarah brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Real strength is breaking, then building again anyway." Outside, the snow kept falling steady and bright. Inside, mother and daughter sat in quiet peace, their world rebuilt, their hearts still tender but whole. And somewhere beyond grief and betrayal, beyond loss and fear, life began again. Spring returned like forgiveness. The snow melted slowly, revealing green shoots pressing through the earth. Sarah's garden came alive again, roses stretching toward sunlight, lilacs perfuming the air. For the first time in years, she felt no heaviness when she woke. The world outside her window looked whole, and somehow so did she. Emma spent her mornings working with the foundation team, her laughter echoing through the house as she held meetings on the phone. Every sound reminded Sarah of how far they'd come from tears and betrayal to laughter and new beginnings. One afternoon, Sarah found herself sitting at her husband's old desk. She ran her fingers across the smooth wood, remembering his steady voice, the smell of his cologne. He had built this life brick by brick, and somehow she'd managed to save it from being stolen. She smiled softly. "We did it," she whispered. A knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. Emma peeked in, smiling. "You okay, Mom?" "Just thinking," Sarah said. Emma stepped inside and handed her a letter. "This came for you from the city council." Sarah opened it. Inside was an invitation recognition ceremony, outstanding contribution to women's advocacy. She blinked, speechless. Emma grinned. "You're getting an award. They want to honor you." Sarah laughed quietly. "I don't need awards." "You deserve it," Emma said firmly, "for everything you've done." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but you're standing next to me." The ceremony was held 2 weeks later in a sunlit hall filled with flowers and gentle applause. As Sarah stepped to the podium, a hush fell over the crowd. She could feel the eyes of every woman there, some who had been helped by the foundation, others who came seeking hope. "I used to think survival meant silence," she began. "That strength was pretending not to hurt. But I learned that real strength is choosing to rebuild after everything has fallen apart and doing it with grace." She paused, glancing at Emma in the front row. "My daughter taught me that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about growing around what broke you." Applause filled the room. Sarah smiled, her eyes bright but calm. For once, she didn't feel like she was standing in her husband's shadow. She was finally herself. Afterward, Emma wrapped her in a tight hug. "Dad would be so proud," she whispered. "He is," Sarah said softly. "I can feel it." That night back home, Sarah sat on the porch while Emma lit candles inside. The sky was painted pink and gold, the air thick with the scent of lilacs. She closed her eyes, breathing it in. The silence wasn't heavy anymore, it was peace. Her phone buzzed. It was Mike. "You made the papers again," he teased. "Front page this time." Sarah laughed. "Is it possible to retire from being admired?" "Not when you're a symbol," he replied, "but maybe take a vacation. You've earned one." She looked toward the lake, its surface shimmering with twilight. "Maybe I will." 2 weeks later, she and Emma packed their bags for Italy, a trip they had dreamed of for years but never taken. When they arrived in Florence, Sarah stood beneath the Duomo, her heart swelling. The city was alive with color, laughter, and music. Mom Emma said, taking her hand, "You're smiling more than I've ever seen you." Sarah looked up at the cathedral dome glowing against the sunset. "It's the first time I've felt completely free." They spent days wandering cobblestone streets, tasting gelato and laughing over old memories. One evening, as they dined in a small cafe overlooking the river, Emma asked quietly, "Do you ever think about him anymore?" Sarah took a sip of wine. "Sometimes, but only as a reminder of what not to forget." "What do you mean? That people can take your trust, your money, even your time, but they can't take your wisdom unless you give it away?" Emma nodded thoughtfully. "That's beautiful." Sarah smiled. "Your father used to say life gives second chances to people who learn the lesson the first time." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting gold light on the Arno River, Sarah realized how far her heart had traveled, from loss to peace, from protection to purpose. When they returned home weeks later, the garden had burst into full bloom. Sarah stood among the roses, touching their petals. The air smelled like renewal. Emma came beside her, smiling. "Feels different now, doesn't it?" Sarah nodded. "It feels like the world is finally right again." They stood there as the evening breeze danced through the leaves, the lake shimmering in the distance. Mom Emma said quietly, "Do you ever wonder what happens next?" Sarah looked toward the horizon. "No," she said softly. "I just live it." Summer arrived with warmth and quiet certainty. The lake glittered beneath a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. Sarah's house was filled with the soft rhythm of an ordinary life. Coffee brewing doors, opening, Emma humming in the kitchen. It was the kind of peace Sarah once thought she'd never feel again. The foundation continued to grow. Letters poured in from women whose lives had been changed. Stories of freedom, courage, and second chances. Each one felt like a whisper of gratitude, proof that pain could be turned into light. One morning, as Sarah sorted through the mail, she paused at an envelope addressed in elegant handwriting. There was no return name, only an address from another state. Curious, she opened it. "Mrs. Johnson." It began. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. My son hurt you and Emma, and though I can't undo what he did, I need you to know he's different now. He's working staying sober and says he's sorry. He told me you were the first person who ever saw through him. Thank you for giving him the truth he needed, even if it cost him everything." It was signed, Margaret Wilson. Sarah read it twice, then folded the paper carefully. Forgiveness wasn't simple. It never erased the past, but it made the present lighter. She slipped the letter into her drawer beside her husband's watch and whispered, "Maybe that's enough." Later that afternoon, she joined Emma in the garden. "What's that smile for?" Emma asked, handing her mother a pair of gloves. Sarah knelt beside her, an old wound finally closing. Emma smiled softly. "Sounds like a good kind of ending." They spent the afternoon tending the flowers. Bees buzzed lazily, the sun warm against their backs. Emma hummed as she worked, and Sarah found herself quietly singing along a habit she'd forgotten she had. Afterward, they sat on the porch, drinking iced tea. The horizon glowed gold, the lake shimmering in the distance. "You know, Emma said the foundation got invited to a conference in New York. They want you to speak." Sarah blinked. "Me?" "You, Emma," said, grinning. "You're the reason it exists." Sarah chuckled softly. "I'm not sure I have anything new to say." "Just tell the truth," Emma replied. "That's what you've always done best." The trip came a month later. New York was loud and alive, but Sarah moved through it calmly, like a woman who had already lived her storms. When she stepped onto the stage, the lights were bright, the crowd hushed. "I used to believe money defined safety," she began, "that if I kept it, I'd be secure. But safety doesn't live in numbers, it lives in choices. It's in the strength to stand your ground when everything you love is threatened." She paused, looking out at the faces before her. "Forgiveness isn't weakness," she said softly. "It's understanding that we can't change what hurt us, but we can decide what we build from it." The applause was long and steady. When it ended, Emma ran to the stage and hugged her. "You were amazing, Mom." Sarah smiled. "So were you for never giving up." They returned home to a letter waiting in the mailbox. This one was brief, a single line on plain paper. "Thank you for letting me live better than I was." No name, just a postmark from another city. Sarah didn't need to guess who it was from. She folded it, placed it beside Margaret's letter, and closed the drawer. Some ghosts didn't need to be chased away. They only needed to fade quietly. That evening, she and Emma cooked dinner together. They ate on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The lake shimmered like glass. Mom Emma said, "If you could change anything, would you?" Sarah thought for a moment. "No," she said. "Everything that broke us built us too." Emma nodded. "You're right. I wouldn't change it either." They sat in silence, listening to the soft sounds of night settling around them, the hum of crickets, the whisper of wind through the leaves. When the first stars appeared, Sarah looked toward the horizon. "You know," she said, "I used to think my life ended when your father died. Then again when Jake tried to destroy it. But it didn't. It just kept beginning." Emma leaned her head on her shoulder. "Maybe that's what strength really is, beginning again." Sarah smiled, eyes glistening. "Yes, sweetheart, and knowing you can." As the night deepened, the moon rose high above the lake, lighting the water like silver. Mother and daughter sat side by side, quiet and content. Their story, once scarred by betrayal, now shimmered with peace. It was not a perfect life, but it was theirs. Autumn returned again, soft and golden. The lake glimmered under the fading light, and Sarah's garden swayed gently in the breeze. The house, once echoing with conflict, now felt filled with laughter, quiet mornings, and the peace of ordinary days. Emma was busier than ever. The Johnson Renewal Fund had grown beyond anything Sarah could have imagined. Offices in 3 states, hundreds of families helped. Sometimes Sarah watched her daughter lead meetings over video calls, her tone confident, her presence commanding. She no longer saw the fragile girl who once cried over a broken marriage. She saw a woman who had found her purpose. One evening, as Sarah prepared dinner, Emma came in with her phone in hand. "You won't believe this," she said, grinning. "They're featuring us in a national magazine. They want to do a full story, our journey, Dad's legacy, everything." Sarah smiled. "You mean your journey? You're the one making this happen." Emma shook her head. "No, Mom. It started with you, the woman who refused to break." Sarah laughed softly, setting down the spoon. "I didn't refuse to break, sweetheart. I just learned how to bend without staying bent." That night after dinner, Sarah sat on the porch, watching the stars. The air smelled like cinnamon and firewood. She thought about how far they'd come, how loss had turned into strength, how pain had become purpose. Her husband's voice echoed in her memory. "Take care of her, Sarah. Teach her how to stand tall." "I did," she whispered. A week later, the magazine team arrived. They spent hours interviewing mother and daughter, taking photos of the house, the garden, the foundation office downtown. When the journalist asked Sarah how she survived betrayal, she paused before answering. "By remembering who I was before it," she said, "and by refusing to let someone else define what I was worth." When the article was published, it spread faster than they expected. Strangers sent letters, emails, and donations. Women shared their own stories of loss, courage, and renewal. Sarah read every message with quiet gratitude. One afternoon, while sorting the mail, she came across a small brown envelope without a return address. Inside was a single photograph, Jake standing beside a construction site wearing a hard hat, smiling faintly. On the back was written, "I'm working. I'm sorry." Thank you for showing me who I was." Sarah stared at it for a long moment. The ache that once came with his name no longer hurt. She placed the photo in her drawer beside the other letters and whispered, "Good. Maybe you found your own beginning too." That evening, she told Emma. Her daughter was quiet at first, then said softly, "Do you forgive him?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Yes, because forgiveness isn't about him anymore, it's about me." Emma smiled faintly. "Then maybe we're finally free." The next day, they drove to the lake. The water was still the surface, catching the reflection of red and gold leaves. Sarah spread a blanket on the grass and sat with her daughter, a picnic basket between them. "You know, Sarah said your father used to dream of this kind of life. Simple, honest, full of meaning." Emma laughed lightly. "I think he'd be proud of us." Sarah nodded. "I know he would." They ate in silence for a while, watching the sun sink lower, painting the sky orange. Emma leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "You ever think about what's next?" Sarah smiled. "I stopped planning next. Life keeps surprising me when I just let it." As dusk fell, fireflies flickered along the water's edge. Sarah listened to the sounds of crickets and distant laughter from the neighboring docks. "I used to be afraid of quiet," she said softly. "It reminded me of loss. Now it feels like home." Emma lifted her head and smiled. "Because it is home." They stayed until the stars came out the lake, glimmering beneath the night sky. When they finally stood to leave, Sarah turned one last time to look at the water. It no longer carried the weight of memory. It shimmered with promise. Back at the house, she paused in the doorway, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender and warmth. "We made it," she whispered. Emma smiled behind her. "We did, Mom." As Sarah turned off the lights and climbed the stairs, her heart was calm. The journey that began with fear had ended with freedom. The story that started in betrayal had become one of resilience and love. And in the soft quiet of that evening, Sarah knew one thing for certain. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning, but in finally being at peace. Winter came soft and slow, wrapping the world in white. Frost glazed the windows, the lake froze at its edges, and the house hummed with quiet warmth. Sarah's mornings began in peace. Coffee, a walk through the frozen garden, an hour spent reading letters from women the foundation had helped. Her days were no longer filled with fear or noise, but with gentle rhythm and purpose. The chaos that once consumed her life had finally turned into calm. Emma called every evening from the city, her voice bright and confident. "Mom," she said one night, "we're launching the new campaign next month. It's called Rebuild. It's for women starting over just like we did." Sarah smiled, warmth in her tone. "You're turning our pain into power. That's something to be proud of." "I learned from you," Emma replied softly. After the call ended, Sarah stayed by the window, watching the snowflakes swirl beneath the streetlight. So much had changed. She had lost her husband, nearly lost her daughter, and faced betrayal that could have broken her. But it hadn't. What remained was something unshakable, something true. Later that week, the phone rang again. It was Mike. "Sarah," he said, excitement in his voice, "I've got news. You're being nominated for the State Humanitarian Award. The Renewal Fund has changed hundreds of lives." Sarah laughed quietly. "Mike, I'm just one part of this. You're the foundation," he said. "None of it would exist without you." She sighed with a smile. "All right. But I'll only go if Emma comes too." When she hung up, she walked to her study. On her desk sat her husband's old watch, still ticking faithfully after all these years. She wound it carefully, listening to its steady rhythm. "We did it, love," she whispered. "We made it through the storm." 2 weeks later, Emma came home for the holidays. Snow blanketed the yard, turning the garden into a white painting. She looked radiant, older, confident, certain of who she was. "I miss this place," she said, hugging her mother tightly. "It smells like cinnamon and peace." Sarah chuckled. "It smells like too much baking." That night they decorated the house together. Candles flickered in the windows, garlands wound up the banister, and laughter filled the rooms, echoing off walls that once knew only silence. When the fire burned low and moonlight spilled through the windows, Emma turned to her mother. "You know what I realized?" she said softly. "Every woman the foundation helps, every single one is really part of your story." Sarah smiled gently. "Ours, sweetheart. They're part of our story." The next morning, Sarah received a letter written in familiar, careful handwriting. She recognized it instantly, Margaret Wilson, Jake's mother. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the page. "Mrs. Johnson," it began, "I wanted to thank you. Jake's working now, living quietly and staying sober. He told me you showed him who he really was. I don't ask for forgiveness, only peace for him, for you, for all of us." Sarah read it twice before folding it neatly. The anger that had once burned so fiercely in her heart had long cooled. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't about forgetting. It was about releasing what no longer deserved to stay. She placed the letter beside her husband's watch and whispered, "Peace granted." That evening, she shared the news with Emma over tea. "He's rebuilding," she said softly. Emma hesitated, looking at her mother. "Do you forgive him?" "Yes," Sarah said after a moment, "because forgiveness frees me, not him." Emma smiled faintly. "Then maybe that's what we all needed." The next morning they drove to the lake. The air was crisp, the water frozen into a sheet of silver ice. They stood side by side at the edge of the dock, the horizon glowing gold as the sun began to rise. "Dad loved this place," Emma said quietly. "He said it reminded him of starting over." Sarah nodded. "That's what life keeps giving us, second chances." They stayed until the sun climbed fully into the sky, painting the world in light. Sarah felt something lift inside her, a final piece of the past letting go. When they returned home, Sarah brewed tea while Emma set the table. The house felt alive again, warm, bright, filled with the kind of peace that only comes after surviving the storm. Over breakfast, Emma asked, "What's next for you, Mom? You've already helped so many people." Sarah smiled thoughtfully. "I'm not done yet. Maybe I'll write a book, our story, the lessons we learned." Emma's eyes lit up. "You should. Women need to hear it." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. "Maybe I will." Outside, snow began to fall again, thick and slow, blanketing the garden in white. Sarah looked through the window, watching it cover the earth like forgiveness itself. Mom Emma said softly, "You know what I've learned from you?" Sarah turned to her. "What's that?" "That peace isn't something you find, it's something you make. Every day, choice by choice." Sarah smiled, her eyes glistening. "Then you've learned everything that matters." They sat together in the warm glow of the fire snow swirling softly beyond the glass. The world had taken so much from them, love, certainty, innocence, but it had given something greater in return, the grace to begin again, and the wisdom to know they already had. Sarah leaned back, feeling the quiet hum of life surrounding her. She thought of her husband's watch, still ticking upstairs of the lake, thawing each spring of Emma's laughter, filling the house once more. The pieces of her life that had once been broken were whole again, not perfect, but true. And as the snow fell outside, Sarah closed her eyes and smiled, knowing the storm had passed for good. Spring came early that year, soft rain washing away the last of winter's chill. The lake thawed slowly, the garden stirred with new life, and Sarah woke each morning to birdsong instead of silence. Her world, once fractured by grief and betrayal, now felt full again, steady, peaceful, alive. Emma had moved back home for a few months to help organize the foundation's next big project. Their mornings began together at the kitchen table, 2 cups of coffee, the scent of toast sunlight streaming across the counter. "We're expanding the fund to rural areas," Emma said one morning, scanning reports. "Women there need resources, but they don't know help exists." Sarah smiled proudly. "You're turning it into something bigger than either of us imagined." Emma grinned. "You built it, Mom. I'm just running with it." Sarah shook her head. "You're building the future I always wanted for you, a life that means something." Later that afternoon, Sarah walked through her garden. The earth was damp, the air rich with the scent of growth. Kneeling by the roses, she thought of all the versions of herself that had lived and died in this soil. The young wife, the grieving widow, the silent protector, the woman who once feared she'd lost everything. And now here she was, rooted, renewed. That evening, Emma joined her outside. "You know," she said, crouching beside her mother, "we should host a gathering here this summer, celebrate everything we've built." Sarah smiled. "You mean everything you've built?" Emma laughed. "Everything we survived." By June, the garden was in full bloom. The day of the gathering arrived clear, and bright sunlight glinting on the lake. Friends, partners, and families from the foundation filled the yard. Laughter drifted through the air, mingling with the hum of music and the scent of lilacs. Sarah moved through the crowd, greeting familiar faces. So many women she had helped were there, women who had walked through heartbreak, loss, and fear, now standing tall. Each one carried a story of renewal. Mike arrived late, smiling as always. "You did it, Sarah," he said, handing her a glass of lemonade. "We did it," she replied. "You believed in me when this was just an idea." He chuckled. "I knew better than to doubt you." As the sun dipped low, Emma took the small outdoor stage, set up near the roses. "Everyone here knows my mother's story." She began, her voice strong but full of emotion. "But what you may not know is how she taught me that healing doesn't end when the pain stops. It begins when we choose to forgive even the unforgivable." The crowd grew still. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. Emma smiled at her mother. She built this foundation out of faith that second chances aren't miracles, they're choices. So tonight, we celebrate not what we lost, but what we found. Applause filled the garden. Sarah rose, walking toward her daughter, as Emma reached out and pulled her into an embrace. "You make me so proud," Sarah whispered. "You showed me how Emma said." As twilight settled, lanterns flickered across the yard, their golden light dancing on the water. Sarah stood for a moment, watching the reflection of the lights shimmer across the lake. It reminded her of how pain once rippled through her life, sharp, endless, and how now peace had taken its place. Mike joined her by the water. "You've come a long way," he said softly. Sarah nodded. "Sometimes I think I had to lose everything to see what really mattered." "And what's that?" he asked. "Love," she said. "Not the kind that traps you, but the kind that frees you." He smiled. "You found that again." Sarah looked toward Emma, laughing with friends, her joy radiant and real. "Yes," she said quietly, "right there." As the night deepened, music drifted over the garden, soft, nostalgic. Sarah swayed gently with the rhythm, her heart steady. She thought of her husband, of all they had built, and of how their love had found new life in their daughter. When the guests began to leave, Emma found her sitting on the porch, gazing at the stars. "You okay, Mom?" Sarah nodded. "Better than okay. I'm content." Emma sat beside her. "It's strange, isn't it? How everything that once hurt us turned into something beautiful." Sarah smiled. "That's what time does, it turns scars into stories worth telling." They sat in silence, the night calm and endless. Fireflies blinked across the lawn, their glow soft and fleeting. Sarah took her daughter's hand. "Promise me something," she said. "No matter where life takes you, never let fear decide what you deserve." Emma squeezed her hand gently. "I promise." The moon rose high, casting silver light across the lake. Sarah leaned back, her heart full. The storm that had once torn her world apart was only memory, now replaced by something unshakable: peace, love, and quiet strength. For the first time in her life, she no longer looked back.